a poor girl was abandoned by her mom, but a kind mafia boss saved her and took her home to spoil her rotten. On the worst night of her life, this scared little girl wandered into the most dangerous street in the city and straight into the arms of the one man everyone feared. He should have walked away. He should have used her. Instead, he protected her, raised her, gave her everything she never had. But now she's grown, and the world she thinks is safe, it's built on a secret so dark it could destroy them both, because someone out there knows who she really is, and they've waited her whole life to come claim her. When bullets start flying and the truth finally bursts out, she realizes this kind mafia boss didn't just save her. He might be the only thing standing between her and a deadly war. So who abandoned her that night? And why is everyone suddenly willing to kill to get her back? And when the truth comes for her, will she run from the man who saved her, or discover he's the only one she can't live without? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain fell in gentle sheets across the gleaming streets of the financial district, turning the evening lights into scattered jewels on wet pavement. Rosie Bennett pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked home from her small cafe, her sensible shoes clicking against the sidewalk. Above her, skyscrapers pierced the cloudy sky like dark sentinels, their windows reflecting the glow of the city. 20 years had passed since Silvio Vargas took her in, and still, the why of it haunted her. He had given her everything: education, security, a home in his sprawling mansion, but never an explanation. The question lingered in her mind like a shadow, growing longer with each passing year. The steady patter of rain against her umbrella triggered a memory she could never fully escape. She was 7 years old again, standing at that bus stop with her mother, clutching a worn doll with yellow yarn hair. "Stay right here, baby," her mother had said, voice trembling. "Mommy needs to buy something from that store. Don't move." Rosie remembered how her mother's red coat had grown smaller and smaller as she walked away until it disappeared around a corner. She waited as the sky darkened, as other buses came and went, as her tiny legs grew tired from standing. Her mother never returned. When fear finally overcame obedience, she wandered the unfamiliar streets, each turn taking her deeper into a maze of warehouses and abandoned buildings. The doll, her only companion, grew damp in her arms as a light drizzle began to fall. The sounds came first, sharp cracks that she would later recognize as gunfire, then shouting, the scrape of boots on concrete, more explosions. She stumbled into an alley, drawn by the chaos like a moth to flame, too young to know better. The scene unfolded like a nightmare. Men in dark suits ducked behind cars, weapons flashing in the dim light. Smoke drifted through the air, carrying the sharp scent of gunpowder. Someone screamed. Another explosion rocked the ground beneath her feet. Then everything stopped. Through the settling smoke, a tall figure emerged. Even at 7, Rosie knew this man was different. He moved like a predator, elegant and dangerous, his expensive suit untouched by the violence around him. Dark eyes found her, and for a moment the world held its breath. "Boss," one of the men called out, "we need to—" Silvio Vargas raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. He approached Rosie slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. She clutched her doll tighter, shivering from cold and fear. But something in his eyes kept her from running. He crouched before her, and she noticed his hands, strong hands that had probably just wielded a weapon, were empty now, held open in a peaceful gesture. "Little one," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Are you lost?" Rosie nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "My mommy left." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or recognition. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. It smelled of expensive cologne and something metallic she couldn't identify. "Please," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Don't leave me." The request seemed to strike him like a physical blow. His men shifted uncomfortably, weapons still held at ready, but Silvio paid them no attention. Instead, he lifted her into his arms with surprising tenderness, cradling her against his chest. "Never," he promised. And even at 7, she knew this was a vow written in blood. Present-day Rosie blinked away the memory as she approached the wrought iron gates of Silvio's mansion. The rain had softened to a misty drizzle, creating halos around the security lights. The gates opened silently at her approach. They always did. Marco, the head of security, waited under the portico with an umbrella. "Miss Bennett," he said, hurrying to shield her from the last few drops of rain. Like all of Silvio's staff, he treated her with a deference that went beyond mere politeness. It was something closer to reverence, as though she were made of glass and gold rather than flesh and blood. "Thank you, Marco," she said, handing him her wet coat. "Is Silvio home?" "Yes, miss. He's requested your presence for dinner, earlier than usual." There it was, that slight shift in Marco's tone that confirmed her instincts. Something was different tonight. The air in the mansion felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. The marble foyer gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, her heels clicking against the floor as she made her way toward the grand staircase. Paintings worth more than most houses lined the walls, their subjects watching her passage with painted eyes. Everything in Silvio's world was beautiful and expensive, carefully curated to project power and wealth. 2 decades of living here, and sometimes she still felt like an intruder, a cafe worker playing dress-up in a mobster's mansion. Other times, when Silvio looked at her with those dark, intense eyes of his, she felt like the most precious thing in his collection. Agnes, the housekeeper, who had helped raise her, appeared at her elbow. "Let's get you changed for dinner, dear. Mr. Vargas was very specific about timing tonight." Rosie followed Agnes up the sweeping staircase, their footsteps muffled by the plush carpet runner. Her suite of rooms, larger than her childhood home had been, waited at the end of the east wing. Everything was exactly as she'd left it that morning, but somehow it all felt different, like the furniture was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "The blue dress, I think," Agnes said, opening the walk-in closet that was bigger than her cafe's kitchen. "The one he had made for you in Milan." The dress in question was a masterpiece of midnight silk that probably cost more than she made in a year. Silvio had ordered it specifically for her, though she'd never had occasion to wear it. Until now, apparently. As Agnes helped her into the dress, Rosie caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her looked elegant, sophisticated. Everything her abandoned 7-year-old self had never dreamed of becoming. The silk clung to her curves before floating away from her hips, the color making her pale skin glow and her dark hair shine. "Perfect," Agnes murmured, fastening a delicate necklace around Rosie's throat. Another gift from Silvio, diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "He'll be pleased." There was something in the housekeeper's tone, something knowing that made Rosie's heart beat faster. "Agnes, what's going on? Why all this fuss over dinner?" The older woman simply smiled, patting Rosie's cheek with maternal affection. "Some questions can only be answered by the one who asks you to dinner, dear. Don't keep him waiting." Rosie made her way back downstairs, her dress whispering against the marble steps. The massive dining room doors stood open, warm light spilling out into the hallway. Inside, the long table was set for 2, crystal glasses catching the light from dozens of candles. And there was Silvio, standing at the window with his back to her, his broad shoulders outlined against the rain-streaked glass. He turned at the sound of her entrance, and for a moment time seemed to stop. He looked exactly as he had that day in the alley, dangerous and elegant, power contained in an expensive suit. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something else entirely, something that made her breath catch and her heart race. "Rosie," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. "You look beautiful." She felt the weight of 20 years of questions in that moment, saw them reflected in his dark eyes. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. She could feel it in her bones, in the charged air between them, in the way he looked at her like she was both salvation and damnation. The rain continued to fall outside, a gentle reminder of the night that had brought them together. Inside, the candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Rosie took her first step toward whatever truth awaited her at that dinner table. Morning light streamed through the tall dining room windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Rosie paused in the doorway, taking in the familiar scene before her. Silvio sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, his untouched espresso growing cold beside him as he studied what appeared to be business documents spread across the polished surface. He looked dangerous even in these quiet moments, his black suit perfectly tailored, dark hair swept back from sharp features that never quite softened, even around her. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, and Rosie felt its familiar pull. The scene triggered another memory, one that had been haunting her dreams lately. 20 years earlier, rain pelted against the windows of Silvio's mansion as Agnes led a shivering 7-year-old Rosie up the grand staircase. The little girl clutched her sodden doll, leaving wet footprints on the expensive carpet. Behind them, Silvio's voice carried from his study, low and urgent as he spoke on the phone. "Bennett. Her name is Rosie Bennett." A pause. "I need everything you can find. Now." Agnes guided Rosie into a bathroom bigger than her old bedroom, all gleaming marble and gold fixtures. "Let's get you warm, little one," the housekeeper said softly, running a bath that smelled like lavender. Through the cracked door, Rosie could hear Silvio's footsteps pacing the hallway. More fragments of conversation drifted in. "Confirm if she's Moreno's. Need to be certain." Agnes helped Rosie out of her wet clothes, tisking at how thin she was. The warm water felt like heaven after hours in the cold rain. As Agnes gently washed her hair, Rosie caught glimpses of Silvio passing the doorway, his face troubled as he spoke in hushed tones. "Dante Moreno's daughter, right under our noses. Changes everything." Later, wrapped in a fluffy towel and wearing one of Agnes's shrunken sweaters, Rosie sat at the kitchen table while the housekeeper made hot chocolate. Silvio appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he studied her. Something in his dark eyes shifted when she smiled at him, a softening so subtle she might have imagined it. "She'll stay here," he announced quietly to Agnes. "Set up the blue room." His gaze never left Rosie as he added, "No one can know who she really is. No one." Present day. "You're thinking too hard this morning." Silvio's voice pulled Rosie back to the present. He was watching her with those same intense eyes, though now they held 2 decades of shared history between them. She moved to her usual seat at his right hand, where a fresh cappuccino waited. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she admitted, gathering her courage. The words she'd rehearsed all night felt heavy on her tongue. "About changes, about independence." Silvio went still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence in other contexts. His hand tightened fractionally on his espresso cup. "What kind of changes?" "I want to move out," Rosie said quickly before her nerve failed. "Get my own place. I'm 27 years old, Silvio. I can't live in your house forever." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Silvio set down his cup with precise control, but Rosie caught the slight tremor in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was deceptively soft. "You want to leave. Not leave completely," she hurried to explain. "Just have my own space, my own life. I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, but nothing." Silvio cut her off, rising from his chair in one fluid motion. He moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid beneath his expensive suit. "It's not safe." "It's never safe enough for you," Rosie countered, frustration bleeding into her voice. "I work at the cafe, I go to the market, I visit friends, all with your men watching my every move. How would living on my own be any different?" He turned then, and the raw possession in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because here, I can protect you myself." "Protect me from what?" She stood too, hands planted on the table. "You've never told me why I need so much protection. Why there are always guards, always rules, always limits on where I can go and what I can do. I'm not that scared little girl anymore, Silvio." Something dark and pained flashed across his features. "No," he agreed softly. "You're not. But the dangers haven't changed." Rosie fought back tears of frustration. "Then tell me what they are. Help me understand why I can't have a normal life." Instead of answering, Silvio moved toward her with predatory grace. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture at odds with the steel in his voice. "You're safe here. With me. That's all you need to know." The tenderness of his touch contrasted sharply with the possessive undertone in his words. It was always like this with him. Protection and prison, care and control, all wrapped up in bonds she couldn't quite understand. Unable to bear the intensity of his gaze, Rosie pulled away. "I need some air," she mumbled, fleeing toward the garden. The morning sun had warmed the roses, their heavy perfume filling the air as Rosie paced the winding paths. This garden had been her sanctuary since childhood, a place where she could pretend the high walls didn't exist, where she could imagine she was just a normal woman in a normal world. But she wasn't normal. She never had been, not since the day Silvio found her in that alley. Hours passed as she sat among the flowers, trying to sort through her tangled emotions. The sun was setting when she finally headed back inside, pausing in the hallway outside Silvio's study as voices drifted through the partially open door. "Double the security detail," Silvio was saying, his tone clipped and cold. "I want eyes on the girl 24 hours a day, no blind spots, no gaps in coverage." "Yes, sir!" Marco, his head of security, sounded grim. "What about her request to move out?" "Not happening." The words fell like ice. Increase surveillance on the cafe, too. And Marco? If anyone unusual shows interest in her, anyone at all, I want to know immediately. Rosie backed away from the door, her heart pounding. The garden suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like an elaborate cage, the walls closing in despite their flowering facades. Sylvia's protection had always felt stifling, but now it was suffocating. She retreated to her suite, locking the door behind her, a futile gesture in a house where Silvio held every key. Outside her window, she could see new guards taking up positions in the gathering dusk, their dark suits blending with the shadows. Protected, Silvio had said. But as Rosie stared at the men who watched her window, she couldn't shake the feeling that protected and imprisoned were starting to mean the same thing. Rosie woke with a strangled gasp, her mother's face fading from her dreams like smoke. In the nightmare, she was 7 again, watching her mother's retreating back as rain soaked through her favorite yellow dress. The bus stop bench had been cold, so cold, and the waiting had stretched for hours until her small legs carried her into that fateful alley. Morning light filtered through silk curtains, casting patterns across her bed in Silvio's mansion. The dream clung to her like cobwebs, along with a crushing realization. She had spent 20 years defined by 2 people, a mother who abandoned her and a man who claimed her. Enough, she whispered to her reflection as she dressed. The woman in the mirror looked uncertain, trapped between gratitude and rebellion. She had to know who she was without Silvio's constant presence, his rules, his protection that felt increasingly like possession. With trembling hands, Rosie pulled a small duffel bag from beneath her bed. She packed quickly, just enough clothes for a few days, her savings, and the worn, stuffed rabbit she'd carried the night Silvio found her. The familiar weight of it gave her courage. The mansion was quiet at this hour, most of the staff still asleep. Rosie slipped through the hallways like a ghost, her soft-soled shoes silent on marble floors. She knew every camera angle, every guard rotation. Knowledge accumulated through years of living in this gilded cage. As she rounded the corner toward the service entrance, voices drifted from behind a heavy door. Silvio's special conference room, the one with soundproofed walls and frosted glass. The door wasn't fully closed. Rosie's steps faltered. Through the gap, she could see Silvio standing over a man tied to a chair. His back was to her, but his posture radiated cold fury. 2 of his soldiers flanked the prisoner, their faces grim. You thought you could sell information to the Morenos? Silvio's voice was terrifyingly soft. After everything I've given you. The bound man spat blood. They offered. The crack of Silvio's hand across the man's face echoed like a gunshot. They offered money. I offered loyalty, family, and you chose greed. Rosie should have run. Should have closed her eyes, covered her ears, preserved the image of Silvio as her protector. The man who read her bedtime stories and taught her chess and kissed her scraped knees better. Instead, she watched in horror as he picked up a pair of pliers from a steel table. Each tooth will buy you a chance to tell me exactly what you shared with them, Silvio said, as casual as discussing the weather. I suggest you start talking. The screaming began. Rosie's bag slipped from numb fingers. The thud was slight, but in that terrible room, Silvio went still. He turned, and through the glass, their eyes met. For one endless moment, she saw him as he truly was, not her guardian angel, but the devil himself, elegant in his violence. Blood speckled his white collar like rubies. He moved toward the door with predatory grace. Rosie stumbled backward, her heart thundering against her ribs, but her legs wouldn't work properly. The door opened. Rosie. His voice was gentle now, but she could still hear echoes of that other tone, the one that promised pain. His gaze dropped to her fallen bag. Going somewhere? I just wanted some air, she managed, the lie tasting like ashes. In the garden. With a packed bag? She couldn't stop staring at the blood on his collar. I was going to exercise. Change of clothes. Silvio stepped closer, and it took everything in her not to flinch. He reached down, lifting her bag with one hand while the other settled on the small of her back. The touch was familiar, almost tender, but now it felt like a brand. Let me escort you back to your wing, he said softly. The garden can wait. The walk was endless. Silvio's hand never left her back, steering her through corridors that suddenly seemed darker despite the morning sun. The man she'd known all her life, the one who held her through nightmares and celebrated her birthdays and worried about her catching cold, was a stranger wearing a monster's skin. Or perhaps the monster had always worn Silvio's skin and she'd been too blind to see it. At her door, he finally released her. "Rest, little Rose. We'll talk later about why you really packed this bag." She fled into her room, locking the door even knowing it was pointless. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The morning stretched into afternoon, then evening, as Rosie paced her suite like a caged animal. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Silvio with those pliers, heard that terrible screaming. When night fell, she made her decision. She couldn't stay, couldn't pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. The second bag she packed was smaller, just essentials. The guards changed shifts at 11, a small window of opportunity while they traded positions. Rosie waited until the house went still, then eased her door open. The hallway was dark, empty. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure it would give her away as she crept toward the rear stairs. "You're becoming predictable." She froze. Silvio materialized from the shadows near her door, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal corded forearms. His voice was quiet, lethal. "Did you think I wouldn't be watching?" He moved closer, backing her against the wall. "That I wouldn't know exactly what you'd try after this morning." "Please," Rosie whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was begging for. Understanding? Freedom? Mercy? "The world out there." Silvio's hand came up to cradle her face, the same hand that had wielded those pliers hours ago. "It's far more dangerous than you can imagine. There are people who would tear you apart just to hurt me, others who would use you as leverage, some who would kill you simply for existing." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I can't live like this anymore. In this beautiful prison, never knowing why." "You belong here," he cut her off, thumb brushing away her tears with devastating gentleness. "Under my protection, whether you agree or not." His other hand plucked the bag from her grip. "Go back to bed, little Rose. We both know you're not going anywhere." It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the same quiet certainty he'd used while ordering that man's torture. Rosie stumbled back to her room, feeling Silvio's eyes on her until she closed the door. She sank onto her bed, staring at nothing as tears fell silently. The stuffed rabbit sat on her pillow, a reminder of the night she'd walked into that alley and found salvation, or perhaps damnation. After today, she wasn't sure there was a difference. Outside her window, shadows moved as guards took up new positions. In his own way, Silvio had answered her questions about why she needed protection, but his answer only raised more questions. Darker ones, stained with blood and echoing with screams. Sleep eluded her as she lay in the dark, wondering if she'd ever really known the man who raised her, wondering if the tenderness she'd always associated with him was real, or just another mask he wore, wondering if she was any safer here, in this gilded cage with its elegant monster, than she would be in the dangerous world beyond his walls. The night stretched endless before her, filled with the weight of chains she'd never noticed until she tried to break them. Morning light streamed through the dining room windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where Rosie sat, picking at her untouched eggs. Silvio occupied his usual place at the head of the table, the Wall Street Journal open before him, but his attention kept drifting to her with predatory focus. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band ready to snap. Every clink of silver against china felt deafening. The failed escape attempt from last night hung heavy in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. "Your coffee's getting cold," Silvio said, his voice deceptively gentle. Rosie's hand tightened around her fork. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." The order was soft but unmistakable. She dropped her fork with a clatter. "I'm not a child anymore. You can't just command me to." "No?" His newspaper lowered, dark eyes fixing on her face. "Then stop acting like one. Running away in the middle of the night? That's what children do." "What would you prefer, that I ask permission like a good little prisoner?" Silvio's jaw tightened. "You're not a prisoner." "Really?" Rosie gestured to the guards positioned at every doorway. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sure feels like it. I want my own life, Silvio, my own apartment, the freedom to come and go without an armed escort." "Impossible." He folded the newspaper with precise movements. "The city isn't safe right now." "The city is never safe according to you." She pushed back from the table, chair scraping against hardwood. "There's always some nebulous threat, some unnamed danger. I'm tired of living in fear of shadows you won't even explain." "Rosie." Her name was a warning. "No, I deserve answers. Why did you really take me in? Why do you keep me locked away like some fairy tale princess in a tower? What are you protecting me from?" Silvio rose slowly, his presence filling the room. "Sit down." Or what? She lifted her chin. You'll lock me in my room. Have your men drag me back if I try to leave again? I'm not yours to control. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth to respond. The window exploded. Glass rained down as the first shot cracked through the morning silence. Rosie barely had time to process what was happening before Silvio tackled her, his body covering hers as they hit the floor. More shots followed, wood splintering where her head had been seconds before. Status! Silvio barked into his radio, one hand cradling her head against his chest. Sniper across the street, boss. 3rd floor, northwest corner. Take them out! I want that building secured now! Rosie trembled beneath him as gunfire erupted outside. Silvio's heartbeat thundered against her cheek, his muscles coiled tight as he shielded her from the chaos. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with his cologne, sandalwood and steel. Eyes on me, little Rose. His voice cut through her panic. You're safe! I've got you! Footsteps pounded through the house. Men shouted updates and coordinates. Through it all, Silvio didn't move, didn't let her go until his radio crackled. All clear, boss. Shooters down. No other threats detected. Only then did he ease back, his hands moving to frame her face. His eyes were wild, pupils blown with adrenaline and fury as he checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did any glass... I'm okay, she whispered, though her whole body shook. I'm okay. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Listen to me very carefully. You will never walk these streets alone again. No more cafe job, no more independent living fantasy. The world wants you dead, Rosie. I'm the only thing standing between you and a bullet. The raw fear in his voice terrified her more than the shooting had. She'd never seen him scared before. Not like this. Pack a bag, he ordered, helping her to her feet. We're moving to the safe house until I personally clear every inch of this property. The next hours passed in a blur. Rosie watched numbly as Silvio's men swept the mansion, photographing bullet trajectories and collecting shell casings. The dining room windows were boarded up. Fresh guards arrived to triple security. Through it all, Silvio kept her within arm's reach, as if afraid she'd disappear the moment he looked away. By dusk, they were settled in a fortified penthouse across town. The space was smaller, but no less luxurious, clearly prepared for situations exactly like this. Rosie sat curled in an armchair, watching city lights twinkle through bulletproof glass while Silvio conducted business in his office down the hall. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when raised voices carried through the ventilation system, she couldn't help listening. You're absolutely certain? Silvio's voice was deadly quiet. Yes, boss. She recognized Marco, his head of security. The shooter wasn't aiming for you. All trajectories point to the girl's chair. They wanted her dead. Who hired them? That's the thing. Marco hesitated. We found this on the body. A moment of silence, then the sound of something being slammed against a desk. Dante fucking Moreno! Silvio's voice dripped venom. After all these years, the bastard finally makes his move. Rosie's heart stopped. The name hit her like another bullet. Dante Moreno. She'd never heard it before, but something about it felt important. Personal. Should we tell her? Marco asked. No. Silvio's response was immediate. She's not ready for that truth. Double the security teams. I want eyes on every rooftop within a mile radius. If Moreno wants to play games with his own daughter's life, we'll remind him why the Vargas family rules this city. The world tilted sideways. Rosie pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle her gasp as the pieces clicked into place. His own daughter's life. Dante Moreno was her father, the man who'd abandoned her before she was born, the man her mother had been running from when she left Rosie at that bus stop. And now he wanted her dead. She sank deeper into the chair as voices continued murmuring down the hall, plans and contingencies she could barely process. Through the roaring in her ears, the city sparkled beyond the window, beautiful and deadly, while her world crumbled around her. Everything made sense now. Silvio's overprotectiveness, the constant security, the way he'd taken her in that night in the alley. She wasn't just some random child he'd rescued. She was the daughter of his enemy, and he'd spent 20 years keeping her safe from a father who wanted her destroyed. The weight of that knowledge settled over her like a shroud as darkness claimed the city. She stayed motionless in that chair, watching shadows lengthen across the floor, wondering if she'd ever feel truly safe again. Rosie burst into Silvio's office, her hands trembling. Dante Moreno is my father. Silvio's head snapped up from his laptop, eyes narrowing dangerously. The muscles in his jaw tightened as he assessed her, no doubt calculating how much she'd overheard. "You were listening." It wasn't a question. "Don't deflect." She planted her hands on his desk, leaning forward. 20 years, Silvio. 20 years of half-truths and vague answers about why you took me in. I deserve to know everything." He closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. "You were abandoned in rival territory. It's all you need to know right now." "Rival territory?" Rosie laughed without humor. "That's what you're going with? Someone just tried to kill me. My own father apparently wants me dead, and you're still feeding me breadcrumbs?" "Rosie," his voice carried a warning. "Some truths are better left. Don't you dare tell me what's better left unsaid." Her voice cracked. "I'm not that scared little girl anymore. I need answers." Silvio stood, his height forcing her to step back. "What you need is to be alive. Everything I've done, everything I keep doing is to ensure that. By keeping me prisoner. By keeping you safe!" The words exploded from him, rare emotion breaking through his controlled facade. Rosie flinched, more from surprise than fear. In 20 years, she'd never heard him raise his voice to her. His expression softened immediately. "Little Rose! Don't!" She backed away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just don't." She fled to her temporary bedroom in the safe house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the frame. The room felt suffocating, another gilded cage, just like every space Silvio created for her. Sleep proved impossible. After hours of tossing and turning, Rosie dragged her keepsake box from her hastily packed bag. She dumped its contents across the bed. Old photos, childhood drawings, the tattered doll she'd clutched that night in the alley. Everything she thought she knew about her past scattered before her like puzzle pieces that suddenly didn't fit. She studied a photo of herself at age 8, sitting in Silvio's garden. Her mother had already been gone a year by then, but Rosie's smile was bright, untroubled. Silvio stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, his expression softer than. She'd ever seen it since. She found another photo from her 10th birthday. The cake was elaborate, the presents numerous, far more than a simple Mafia lieutenant should have been able to afford. But Silvio wasn't just a lieutenant anymore by then, was he? The timeline clicked into place. His rise to power, his increasing protectiveness, the way his men treated her with such deference. He'd been building an empire all along, and somehow, she was central to it. Dawn found her still awake, surrounded by memories that felt like lies. When Silvio knocked at 7 o'clock sharp, she was already dressed. "We're moving," he announced without preamble. "The penthouse is more secure." "Your penthouse?" Rosie blinked. In all their years together, she'd never set foot in his personal residence. "Pack what you need. Car leaves in 20 minutes." The drive was tense and silent. Rosie watched the city blur past bulletproof windows, trying to process that less than 24 hours ago. She'd been planning her escape to independence. Now she was being moved deeper into Silvio's world than ever before. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek high-rise. The security was staggering. Retinal scanners, armed guards, multiple checkpoints. But it was the interior that took Rosie's breath away. This wasn't just a shelter. This was Silvio stripped bare. The space was simultaneously masculine and elegant, all dark woods and leather with surprising touches of warmth. A chess set waited mid-game by a window. Books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves, many in Italian. Family photos lined one wall. She recognized his parents, his brother who'd been killed years ago. And there, tucked among them, was a photo of her. "Your room is upstairs," Silvio said quietly, watching her examine his private world. "Second door on the right." Rosie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She climbed the curved staircase, acutely aware of his eyes following her movement. The bedroom was beautiful, clearly prepared with her in mind. Soft blues and creams, a window seat overlooking the city, fresh flowers on the nightstand. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, it felt like another piece of evidence that Silvio had planned for every contingency, including this one. She spent the day exploring the penthouse while Silvio worked in his study. Every room revealed new facets of the man who'd raised her. His love of classical music, his collection of rare weapons, his preference for expensive scotch. How had she lived so close to him for so long without knowing these intimate details? As night fell, she stood at her bedroom window, watching city lights flicker to life below. Her whole life seemed to revolve around Silvio, his protection, his rules, his secrets. Even now, being hunted by her own father, she was running deeper into Silvio's orbit instead of away from it. She didn't hear him enter, didn't know he was there until his reflection appeared, behind hers in the glass. We'll talk tomorrow, he said, his voice low and intense. I'll tell you the truth you're ready to hear. But tonight, he paused and she turned to face him. Tonight, I need you to sleep where I can hear you breathing. Their eyes met in the dim light. There was something raw in his expression, something almost desperate. Someone wants you dead, little Rose. His words hung in the air between them. And I can't. He stopped, jaw clenching. I won't let that happen. Rosie's heart thundered in her chest. She'd never seen him like this. Protective yet vulnerable, powerful yet exposed. It scared her more than any assassination attempt. Sleep, he said again, softer now. Tomorrow will come soon enough. He left without waiting for her response, leaving the door open behind him. Through it, she could hear him moving in the hallway, setting up what sounded like a desk and chair. He meant it literally, she realized. He intended to spend the night within earshot of her breathing. Rosie sank onto the window seat, city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. Everything was changing. Her understanding of her past, her relationship with Silvio, her very identity. Tomorrow would bring truths she'd waited 20 years to hear. But tonight, she was just a girl in a tower, guarded by a man who'd shaped his entire empire around keeping her safe. She didn't know if that should terrify her or comfort her. Perhaps she thought as she finally climbed into bed. It was both. Rosie woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her. The penthouse bedroom felt worlds away from her usual quarters in Silvio's mansion. Here, everything spoke of intimacy, from the cashmere throw draped across the foot of her bed to the fresh orchids on her nightstand. The events of yesterday crashed back. The assassination attempt, the revelation about her father, Silvio bringing her here to his private sanctuary. She padded to the ensuite bathroom, finding it stocked with her preferred toiletries. Of course, Silvio had thought of everything. When had he arranged all this? The question nagged as she showered and dressed in clothes she found already hanging in the closet, all new, all exactly her size. The scent of coffee drew her downstairs. She expected to find Silvio in his formal dining room, but instead discovered him in the kitchen. He stood at the massive island, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to expose powerful forearms as he poured 2 cups of coffee. You're up, he said without turning. Sit. Marco is bringing breakfast. The kitchen felt different from the rest of the penthouse. Warmer, more lived in. Copper pots hung from a rack overhead. Fresh herbs grew in window boxes. This was where Silvio actually lived, she realized, not just where he maintained his image. Marco arrived with plates of fresh fruit, pastries, and eggs. To her surprise, he set them at the kitchen island, rather than the dining room table. Silvio gestured for her to take a seat beside him on one of the leather bar stools. Why is someone trying to kill me? Rosie asked, breaking the morning quiet. And don't tell me it's complicated. I deserve answers. Silvio took a deliberate sip of coffee. Your bloodline is dangerous, little Rose. There are people who would hurt you simply for existing. Because of Dante Moreno, my father? The name felt foreign on her tongue. What did he do that was so terrible? It's not what he did. It's what he represents. Silvio's jaw tightened. And what that makes you in their eyes. Their eyes? Whose eyes? Frustration leaked into her voice. Stop speaking in riddles. The less you know right now, the safer you are. He set down his coffee cup with careful precision. What matters is keeping you alive, which means you stay close to me, always. I'm not a child anymore, Silvio. You can't just... No, he cut in. You're not a child, which is exactly why I'm going to teach you to defend yourself. The statement caught her off guard. What? After breakfast, change into something you can move in. An hour later, Rosie stood barefoot on training mats Silvio had ordered, brought to the penthouse's home gym. She wore black leggings and a fitted tank top, trying not to feel self-conscious as Silvio circled her, assessing her stance. Wider, he instructed, tapping her ankle with his foot. Center your weight. Someone comes at you from behind. What's your first move? Scream. His lips twitched. And if they have a hand over your mouth? He demonstrated, stepping behind her and covering her mouth with his palm. His chest pressed against her back, solid and warm. Bite, she said, voice muffled against his hand. Good. What else? She remembered a self-defense video she'd watched once. Stomp on their foot, elbow to the ribs. Show me. She shifted her weight, prepared to demonstrate. But he anticipated her move. In one fluid motion, he swept her legs out from under her. She yelped as she fell, but his arms caught her before she hit the mat. "Too slow," he murmured, his face inches from hers. Again. They spent hours drilling basic moves, how to break holds, where to strike for maximum impact, how to use an attacker's weight against them. Silvio was a demanding teacher, but his hands were gentle when correcting her form. By early afternoon, Rosie's muscles ached and her skin was slick with sweat. During one sequence, she lost her balance and stumbled against Silvio's chest. His hands steadied her waist, fingers spanning her ribcage. Heat bloomed where they touched. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Rosie became acutely aware of his breathing, of how his shirt clung to his shoulders, of the faint spice of his cologne mixed with clean sweat. She jerked away, face burning. "I need water." If Silvio noticed her reaction, he didn't comment, but his eyes followed her to the water cooler, dark and unreadable. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings Silvio conducted from his home office while Rosie explored the penthouse, trying to ignore the guards stationed at every exit. She found a library filled with first editions, a music room with a grand piano, a rooftop garden she wasn't allowed to visit. At sunset, Silvio's head of security reported a suspicious vehicle circling the block. Rosie watched from the window as black SUVs peeled away from the building, hunting the threat. "Clear the floor," Silvio ordered his remaining men. "I want everyone out except essential personnel." "Sir?" One guard hesitated. "Protocol suggests—" "Out," Silvio repeated softly. The guard fled. Rosie turned from the window. "What are you doing?" "Simplifying security." He crossed to the closet and retrieved spare blankets and a pillow. "The fewer people with access to this floor, the better." Understanding dawned as he dropped the bedding onto her room's leather couch. "You're sleeping here." "It's more efficient than posting guards." "It's inappropriate," she protested, but the word felt hollow. How many nights had he already spent in that hallway chair, guarding her door? "Sleep, little Rose." He disappeared into the bathroom and emerged in black silk pajama pants and a fitted t-shirt that did nothing to hide the gun holstered at his ribs. Rosie slipped under her own covers, hyper-aware of his presence as he settled onto the couch. The city lights cast his silhouette in sharp relief. Broad shoulders, strong profile, one arm draped across his eyes. When had this happened? When had her protector, her guardian, become something else entirely? Something that made her pulse quicken and her skin flush? Something dangerous in an entirely different way than guns and violence? She watched him breathe in the darkness, remembering the heat of his hands on her waist, the solid press of his chest against her back. The memory sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Sleep proved elusive as questions tumbled through her mind. Who was she really? What secrets lay in her blood? And most troubling of all, when had Silvio Vargas stopped being the man who raised her and become the man who made her feel this way? His steady breathing filled the quiet room, a sound that should have been familiar after so many years under his protection. Instead, it felt startlingly intimate in the darkness, like a secret she wasn't meant to know. Rosie rolled onto her side, facing away from his silhouette, but she couldn't escape his presence. It filled the room like smoke, wrapping around her senses until she could think of nothing else. The night stretched on, marked by distant sirens and the soft rustle of sheets as she shifted restlessly. Silvio remained motionless on the couch, but she knew he wasn't sleeping. She could feel him listening to her every movement, alert even in rest. Guardian, protector, jailer. None of the words fit anymore. None of them captured the complexity of what he'd become to her, what they'd become to each other. She closed her eyes, trying to find sleep, but her mind kept returning to the training session, to the moment their bodies had connected, to the look in his eyes when he'd caught her, dark and hungry and quickly masked. The night wrapped around them like a cocoon, holding questions neither was ready to answer. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Rosie paced outside Silvio's office. She'd heard him leave for an upstairs meeting 15 minutes ago. Her heart thundered against her ribs as she tested the handle. Unlocked. The office smelled of leather and his cologne. Dark wood paneling gave the room a somber feeling, like a confessional booth. Rosie's fingers trembled as she approached his desk, guilt warring with determination. "Just 5 minutes," she whispered to herself, sliding into his leather chair. The desk was immaculate, everything arranged with military precision. She started with the top drawer, finding only standard office supplies. The second drawer held financial records, nothing useful. But the third, her breath caught. A stack of manila folders sat inside, labeled with familiar names from Silvio's organization. Near the bottom, one name jumped out. Moreno? Bloodline. Rosie's hands shook as she lifted the folder. Inside, she found documents detailing regular payment transfers to an address she didn't recognize. Bank statements showed monthly deposits spanning back 20 years. Paper-clipped to one statement was a photo, a shabby apartment building with an address scrawled on the back. Mom's old place, Rosie whispered, recognizing the peeling paint and cracked concrete steps from her childhood memories. She dug deeper, finding more photos. Her mother, younger and harder looking, accepting an envelope from one of Silvio's men. Another showed her boarding a bus, timestamp indicating the day she'd abandoned Rosie. Footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. Quickly, she shoved everything back into place, heart racing, as she tried to arrange the papers exactly as she'd found them. The door opened just as she stepped away from the desk. Silvio filled the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in her flushed face and guilty stance. His eyes flickered to the desk, noting the slightly disturbed papers. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken accusations. I was looking for a pen, Rosie lied, the words tasting bitter. Silvio crossed to his desk, straightening the papers with precise movements. There are pens in the kitchen drawer. Right. I'll check there next time. He didn't call her out on the obvious lie, but tension crackled in the air as he studied her. His dark eyes seemed to see right through her defenses, reading every secret thought. We need to collect your things from the safe house, he said finally. Be ready in 10 minutes. Relief at avoiding confrontation mixed with frustration at his continued evasion. Rosie nodded and escaped to her room, mind spinning with what she'd discovered. The drive to the safe house was silent. Silvio's security detail followed in separate vehicles, maintaining a protective bubble around their car. Rosie watched the city blur past, remembering the address she'd seen in the folder. Her mother had lived less than 20 blocks from here. The safe house was a modest brownstone, deliberately unremarkable among its neighbors. Inside, everything remained exactly as they'd left it during their hasty departure days ago. Pack quickly, Silvio instructed, posting guards at every entrance. Essential items only. Rosie moved through her old bedroom, gathering childhood mementos and photos. Her fingers lingered on an old doll, the same one she'd clutched the night Silvio found her. She tucked it into her bag, along with a box of keepsakes. A flash of movement through the window caught her attention. Rosie squinted at the street, trying to identify what had triggered her instincts. The first gunshot shattered the window beside her. Down! Silvio's voice cracked like a whip as he tackled her, covering her body with his own as glass rained around them. More shots followed, the sharp rapport of automatic weapons. Return fire erupted from Silvio's men outside. Through the chaos, Rosie felt Silvio's heart hammering against her back, his breath harsh in her ear. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his gun. Don't move! He rolled away, taking up position beside the broken window. Two figures in black tactical gear were advancing up the sidewalk, firing steadily at the house. Silvio's first shot caught the closer attacker in the throat. The man dropped without a sound. The second attacker dove for cover, but Silvio's next shot found him anyway, a clean hit through the temple. The entire exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Silence fell, broken only by distant sirens and the crunch of glass under Silvio's shoes as he moved to check her for injuries. Are you hurt? His hand skimmed over her arms, her sides, her face. Raw fear blazed in his eyes, not fear of the attack, but fear of finding her bleeding. I'm okay, she whispered, shocked by the intensity of his concern. I'm not hit. His fingers lingered on her cheek, thumb brushing away a speck of glass. For a heartbeat, the tenderness in his touch made her forget the violence they'd just witnessed. Sir, one of his men called from outside. Area's clear, but we need to move. Silvio's expression hardened as he helped her up. Take what you have. We're leaving. The ride back to the penthouse passed in a blur. Rosie clutched her bag of belongings, mind racing as she pieced together the day's revelations. The payments to her mother's address, spanning 2 decades. The file labeled with her father's name. The level of security surrounding her, far beyond simple protection. Silvio's desperate fear when she was threatened. He was hiding something massive about her identity, something worth killing for. In the penthouse that night, Rosie spread her collected clues across her bed. The old doll, worn photographs, birthday cards from Silvio over the years. Each item held fragments of truth she'd been too young to recognize. She thought of Silvio's face when he found her in his office, the way he'd chosen silence over lies. The fear in his eyes during the attack, raw and revealing. The gentle way he'd touched her face after, as if reassuring himself she was whole. Whatever secret lay at the heart of this, it was big enough to make Silvio Vargas, the most dangerous man she knew, afraid. Rosie gathered her evidence and sat cross-legged on the bed, determination settling over her like armor. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She owed it to herself to understand why her life had become a battlefield, why her blood made her a target. Through the wall, she heard Silvio speaking quietly on the phone, coordinating with his men. His voice carried the edge of contained violence she was learning to recognize, the sound of a predator preparing for war. Let him plan his strategies. Let him build his walls of security and silence. Rosie had found the first thread of truth today, and she would follow it until the whole tapestry unraveled. She touched the old doll's worn face, remembering the night Silvio had found her, how readily she'd trusted him, how completely he'd changed her world. Now it was time to discover why. Outside her window, the city sprawled in glittering patterns of light and shadow. Somewhere in that maze of streets lay answers about her past, her blood, her destiny. Somewhere out there, both enemies and truths were waiting to be found. Rosie sorted her clues into careful piles, mind already forming plans. She would play the obedient ward a little longer, would let Silvio think his secrets were safe. But she would find the truth. And when she did, nothing, not even Silvio Vargas himself, would stop her from claiming it. Through the wall, Silvio's voice continued its quiet litany of orders and threats. Rosie listened, wondering how many of those plans revolved around keeping her in the dark. Soon, she promised herself. Soon she would know everything. Morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Rosie's fingers flew across Silvio's laptop keyboard. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay calm. Yesterday, during his meeting, she'd seen him type the password. Isabella, 1984. Likely his mother's name and year. The screen unlocked. She navigated through folders until she found one labeled Moreno Archive. Inside were hundreds of files spanning decades. Her hands trembled as she opened the first document. Crime scene photos, police reports, surveillance logs, and there, in stark black text, Dante Moreno, biological father of Rosalia Bennett. The room spun. More images filled the screen. A younger Dante standing over a bloodied man, his cruel smile identical to the one in her nightmares. Reports detailed. Assassinations, torture sessions, territory wars. One file stood out. Marco Vargas murder investigation. Silvio's brother. The details made her stomach heave. Marco had been tortured for 3 days before dying. The killer, Dante Moreno, her father. "What are you doing?" Silvio's voice cut through her horror. He stood in the doorway, face carved from stone. "You knew," her voice cracked. "All this time, you knew who I was." "Yes." He moved closer, every step measured. "I knew the moment I saw your mother's name on your school records." "Why?" She gestured at the screen. "Why take in the daughter of the man who murdered your brother?" "Because you were innocent?" His voice softened. "A child who needed protection?" "Protection?" She laughed bitterly. "Or revenge? Was I just leverage against him?" "No." The word snapped like a whip. "That night in the alley, when you trusted me without hesitation." He paused, struggling. "I was drowning in darkness after Marco's death. Your faith pulled me back." "How can I believe you?" Thunder rolled outside as storm clouds gathered. "My father tortured your brother to death." "Dante Moreno may share your blood, but he is not your father." Silvio's eyes blazed. "He abandoned you before you could walk. I'm the one who raised you, protected you, gave you everything." "Everything except the truth!" Rain lashed the windows. "You let me wonder for 20 years why my mother left me, why you took me in. I deserve to know. To protect you." He advanced, raw emotion breaking through his control. "If Dante knew you were alive..." The lights went out as thunder crashed overhead. In the sudden darkness, they froze, inches apart. Lightning flashed, illuminating the anguish on his face. "I couldn't lose you too," he whispered. The confession hung between them. Another flash revealed tears on her cheeks. His hand rose to brush them away, fingertips trailing fire across her skin. She swayed toward him, drawn by the magnetic pull that had always existed between them, but had never felt this dangerous. His breath feathered across her lips as he leaned in. The door burst open. "Sir, we have movement on the perimeter cameras." They jerked apart. Silvio's mask slammed back into place. "How many?" "3 vehicles approaching from the south. Armed." "Move to the secure level, now." He gripped Rosie's elbow, steering her toward the hallway. "All personnel on high alert." They descended to the reinforced basement level, tension crackling between them. Rosie's mind spun with revelations about her father, about Silvio, about the electricity that had sparked between them in the darkness. Security teams rushed past with weapons and equipment. Monitors showed tactical positions being established. Through it all, Silvio kept his hand on her arm, as if afraid she'd disappear. In the secure room, he finally released her. "Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but me." She nodded, still shaken from everything. The truth about her father, the almost kiss, the imminent danger. As he turned to leave, she caught his wrist. "Silvio." Their eyes met. "We're not finished talking about this." "No," he agreed softly, "we're not." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the storm of emotions raging inside her. Outside, thunder continued to shake the building as rain pounded against the reinforced windows. But it was the memory of Silvio's almost kiss that made her tremble. The explosion rocked the building's foundation, sending tremors through the secure level. Rosie stumbled, but Silvio's arm shot out, steadying her. "Stay behind me," he ordered, drawing his weapon as alarms blared. Through security feeds, they watched black-clad figures swarming the garage entrance. The first attacker burst through the stairwell door. Silvio's shot found its mark without hesitation. 2 more followed, and they dropped just as quickly. Rosie pressed against the wall, unable to look away as Silvio moved with lethal grace, each movement precise and devastating. "Clear the east wing," he commanded into his radio, voice cold and unfamiliar. When bullets sprayed the hallway, he shielded her with his body, returning fire while backing them toward the panic room. Blood stained his sleeve, a graze wound. Yet he fought on, protecting her with savage efficiency that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. This was Silvio, stripped of pretense, the Mafia boss who ruled through power and violence, but who would die to keep her safe. Hours later, dawn approached as they huddled in the panic room's dim light. Rosie dabbed antiseptic on his arm, trying not to flinch when he tensed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, both for the sting and for seeing his darkness so clearly. "Don't be." His voice was rough. "You should know what I am." "I know who you are." She cleaned another cut on his shoulder. "Tell me about Marco." Pain flickered across his face. "He was kind, gentle, everything I wasn't. When Dante tortured him," his fist clenched, "I swore never to care for anything that could be used against me again." "But you cared for me." Her fingers brushed his, differently than I should have. He caught her hand, thumb tracing her palm. "From the moment you trusted me in that alley, you became my weakness." Their eyes met in the shadows, years of unspoken feelings surfacing. Rosie laced their fingers together, offering silent comfort as his walls crumbled. When sunrise painted the sky orange, they emerged to survey the damage. Bodies had been removed, blood cleaned away, but evidence of violence lingered. They stood closer now. Something fundamental shifted between them. Yet as Silvio's phone buzzed with reports of movement at the city's borders, they both knew their world had become more dangerous than ever. The truth was out, and with it, all protection of ignorance was gone. Rosie woke to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows. Her neck ached from sleeping awkwardly on the couch where she dozed off beside Silvio after they'd finally left the panic room. The memory of his vulnerability hours before made her chest tight. In the kitchen, they moved around each other with careful awareness. Silvio poured coffee while she buttered toast, neither speaking but hyper-conscious of every accidental brush of arms or shared glance. The quiet felt different now, heavy with things unsaid. His phone shattered the moment. Silvio's face turned to stone as he listened, knuckles white around the device. "Your mother," he said flatly. "Dante has her. He wants you in exchange." "What?" Rosie's mug slipped, coffee splashing across marble. "We have to help her." "I'm handling it." Silvio was already barking orders into his phone, summoning his captains. "By starting a war, there has to be another way." "There isn't." His voice cut like steel. "You can't keep controlling everything," Rosie exploded. "My whole life has been your cage." "Your safety matters more than your pride," he snarled back. "My choices matter. You don't own me." Silvio's jaw clenched before he stormed out, leaving Rosie alone as dusk painted the windows purple. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, grief and fury tangling in her throat. He would never let her choose, never trust her to make her own fate. She was just another piece in his empire to control. Night had fallen when Rosie's phone buzzed. The message made her heart stop. "Come alone to the industrial district. Your mother will be freed. No police, no Vargas men." She stared at the city lights through the window. Silvio would never let her go, but maybe she could stop this bloodshed herself. Using knowledge from years of living here, she slipped into the service elevator, dodging the guards' usual patterns. The taxi ride felt endless. Abandoned warehouses loomed ahead, their broken windows like hollow eyes. Her mother's silhouette appeared in the distance, but something was wrong. As Rosie moved closer, horror froze her. Her mother slumped unconsciously, wired to explosives. "Beautiful setup, isn't it?" Dante emerged from shadows, smiling coldly. "You're the perfect weapon against Silvio. Poetic, really." At the penthouse, Silvio discovered her absence. His roar of rage echoed through halls as he armed himself, ready to mobilize every soldier. "Burn it all," he commanded. "Find her!" Gunfire and explosions rocked the compound as Rosie struggled against her bonds. Her unconscious mother slumped beside her. Through smoke-filled corridors, Silvio fought like a demon possessed, taking bullets but advancing relentlessly toward her location. His eyes found hers across the room, dark with fury and fear. "I'm here," he growled, cutting her free while his specialist worked frantically on the bomb's timer. Dante emerged from the chaos, pistol raised. The shot caught Silvio's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Without hesitation, Rosie grabbed a fallen gun and fired. Her biological father crumpled, eyes wide with shock. Silvio collapsed into her arms, blood seeping through his shirt. "Stay with me," she whispered, holding him close as medics rushed in. Days later, in his private medical suite, Rosie watched Silvio sleep, knowing with absolute certainty where she belonged. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.